In a prestigious university classroom, the stage was set for what seemed like another typical day of sharp critique and debate. Professor Emma Lewis, known for her bold and often provocative statements, was about to take the class down a familiar path. Today's lesson was centered on the power of public image and reality. The students, accustomed to her fiery rhetoric, sat back in their seats, ready for another session of thought-provoking discourse. But no one, not even the professor, could have predicted the storm that was about to unfold. With a swift motion, Professor Lewis wrote the words, "Perception versus reality," on the board, signaling the start of her lesson. She turned to the class, her eyes scanning the room, and began with a statement that immediately caught everyone's attention. She asked, "Have you ever wondered if the image we see of someone is truly who they are, or is it just a constructed illusion?" The classroom fell into a hushed silence. Then, with a slight grin, she introduced an example, a name that instantly shifted the atmosphere: Melania Trump. The professor's tone was laced with subtle mockery as she criticized Melania, calling her a woman who was praised for her flawless appearance and elegance but had contributed nothing meaningful to society. She questioned if her image, carefully curated by the media, was worth celebrating. As the words left her mouth, a ripple of amusement spread across the room. Some students chuckled, others exchanged knowing glances, as the professor continued to tear down the former First Lady. What seemed like just another class discussion on media manipulation, however, would quickly become far more than anyone could have anticipated. It was not just a critique of Melania Trump, it was an unwelcome challenge to someone who could no longer sit silently and watch his mother be mocked. Barron Trump had always preferred to remain in the background. The son of a former president, he understood the weight that came with his name. He had spent most of his life in the shadows, trying to experience the world without the constant scrutiny that followed his family. Dressed simply in a gray hoodie and jeans, Barron wasn't interested in being noticed. He wanted to be seen for who he was, not for his lineage. But that day, in that classroom, something changed. As Professor Emma Lewis continued her lecture, Barron sat in the third row, quietly absorbing every word. He wasn't the type to speak out, especially in a public setting. He had learned early on that silence often kept the peace, that keeping his thoughts to himself was the safest choice. But when the professor mocked his mother, the woman who had shaped his life in ways most people would never understand, something inside him snapped. He clenched his fists under the desk, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, he sat there, wrestling with his emotions. Should he stay quiet, as he always had, or should he speak up? Barron glanced around the room. No one knew who he really was, and for once, that didn't matter. What mattered was that no one else in that room was going to defend Melania Trump, his mother, if he didn't. He rose to his feet, his movements deliberate but calm. As the class fell into stunned silence, all eyes turned toward him. He locked eyes with Professor Lewis, his voice steady but powerful as he spoke. "Professor, you make an interesting point, but let me ask you something. Have you ever actually tried to understand who Melania Trump is, or are you only seeing her through the image the media has created for you?" The room held its breath. For the first time, Barron wasn't the quiet, invisible student in the back. He was speaking his truth, defending the woman he loved against the unfair and shallow judgments of the world. With every word he spoke, he challenged the assumptions people held about Melania, assumptions that were based not on her actions, but on the distorted image created by the media. Barron wasn't just standing up for his mother, he was standing up for something much bigger, the idea that no one should be judged by surface-level perceptions, but rather by the full depth of who they are as individuals. The moment was powerful, not because of who he was, but because of what he stood for. Barron Trump, the quiet student who had always shied away from the spotlight, had found his voice when it mattered most. The classroom fell into an eerie silence as Barron Trump's words hung in the air. It wasn't just the students who were stunned by his sudden outburst, even Professor Emma Lewis, usually poised and in control, was caught off guard. The professor, known for her sharp wit and unyielding confidence, had expected to lead the class through a typical debate, challenging the students to think critically about public figures and media manipulation. But in that moment, the classroom's dynamic shifted. Barron Trump had taken a stand, and what followed was an unexpected confrontation that left everyone questioning their assumptions. Professor Lewis had, up until that point, maintained a position of superiority. She had built her career on dissecting public figures and questioning the narratives that the media spun around them. But when Barron stood up and demanded to be heard, something changed. For the first time, she was the one being questioned. Barron's voice was calm yet unwavering as he challenged her narrow perspective of his mother, Melania Trump. With each sentence, he peeled back the layers of assumptions and judgments that had been so easily made about her. Barron didn't just defend Melania, he called out the very system that allowed people to judge others without understanding their true story. Professor Lewis, who was so used to having the floor, suddenly found herself at a loss for words. She had been caught in the trap of media manipulation just as much as anyone else, and Barron's words struck a chord with her. It was clear that she had underestimated the power of his voice, and for a moment, she seemed unsure of how to respond. The students, who had expected a lively debate, were now witnessing something entirely different, a moment of vulnerability. Barron's defense of his mother wasn't just an emotional plea, it was a challenge to the classroom, a call to rethink how we form opinions and how easily we fall into the trap of judging others based on surface-level perceptions. As the silence stretched on, it was almost as if time itself had frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. It was a powerful moment of introspection. Barron didn't need to shout or demand attention, his calm, collected demeanor spoke volumes. He had exposed the flaw in the professor's argument, not through anger, but through the quiet force of truth. And in doing so, he had made the entire classroom stop and think about how we judge others, particularly public figures, and how often we do so without knowing the full story. In the back of the room, a few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces reflecting the weight of what Barron had just said. Jessica, a top student known for her sharp mind and skepticism toward politics, had always dismissed Melania Trump as nothing more than a polished image. But as she listened to Barron's words, something began to shift within her. For the first time, she questioned her own assumptions. Barron wasn't just defending his mother, he was challenging everyone in that room to question their biases and to look beyond the surface. Professor Lewis, though still visibly taken aback, regained her composure and nodded, acknowledging that Barron had made a valid point. The acknowledgement wasn't an apology, but it was an important shift, a sign that even someone as confident as the professor could be forced to reassess her stance. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful part of the moment. Barron hadn't just spoken up for his mother, he had made an entire room reconsider their perspectives. What started as a lecture on media manipulation had turned into a lesson on the power of questioning our assumptions, and how easy it is to overlook the humanity behind every public figure. The story of Barron Trump's confrontation with Professor Emma Lewis quickly gained momentum when the video of the moment went viral. It wasn't just the fact that a student had stood up to a professor, no, it was deeper than that. The entire nation watched as Barron, a quiet, seemingly unremarkable young man, defied expectations and delivered a message that resonated far beyond the classroom walls. Within hours, the video amassed hundreds of thousands of views, and within a day, it had exploded across social media platforms. News outlets, influencers, and online personalities were all sharing the clip, sparking debates about judgment, media bias, and the complex nature of public perception. People from all walks of life were talking about it, some were in awe of Barron's courage to defend his mother, while others criticized him for his stance. The comments were divided, with some calling him a hero for challenging the narrative around Melania Trump, and others dismissing him as overly sensitive or misguided. But what couldn't be denied was the power of the moment itself. The video wasn't just a confrontation, it was a spark that ignited a national conversation about how we form our opinions about others, especially public figures, and how easily we can be manipulated by media narratives. Barron had done something many thought was impossible, he had forced people to reconsider their beliefs. For those who had only seen Melania Trump as an image, a carefully crafted symbol of elegance and mystery, Barron's words challenged them to look deeper. He reminded the world that behind every public figure is a real person, someone with a story and experiences that often go untold. His defense wasn't just about his mother, it was about the need for empathy and understanding in a world where judgment is so often passed without knowing the full story. As the video continued to circulate, it became clear that this wasn't just a moment of personal defiance for Barron, it was a call to action for everyone who watched. People began to question their own biases, their own assumptions about others, and the way the media shapes our views. Some even took to social media to share their own stories of being judged unfairly, or of changing their minds about someone after taking the time to learn more about them. In the days that followed, Barron's actions continued to ripple through the public consciousness. He had become an unexpected symbol of the power of quiet conviction. He didn't seek fame, he didn't want accolades, and he didn't need the validation of others. What mattered to him was that people had begun to listen, to think critically, and to reconsider the way they viewed not just Melania Trump, but every person they encountered. Barron's challenge wasn't just to Professor Lewis, it was to all of us. It was a reminder that before we judge, we must first seek to understand. His quiet yet powerful moment of standing up for what he believed in was a lesson we all needed to hear, and it reverberated long after the video had gone viral. The story of Barron Trump's quiet but powerful stand in his university classroom serves as a stark reminder of the importance of empathy, understanding, and questioning the narratives we hear. In a world where social media and the media at large shape our perceptions, it's easy to reduce someone to a caricature, to judge them based on snippets of information rather than the full picture. Barron's defense of his mother, Melania Trump, in that pivotal moment challenges us all to take a step back before passing judgment. In today's fast-paced, information-driven society, we often rush to conclusions without considering the complexities behind the stories we hear. Barron's words remind us that there is more to every person than meets the eye, especially public figures who are so often scrutinized by the media. His refusal to stay silent and his insistence on speaking up for what he believed in isn't just a personal act of defiance, it's a call for us to look beyond surface-level judgments and to take the time to understand the real stories behind the people we see on the screen or in the headlines. The lesson here goes beyond political figures or celebrities, it applies to everyday life. We all encounter people who are easy to judge based on assumptions, whether it's a colleague, a friend, or even a stranger. Barron's stand urges us to dig deeper, to listen more, and to remember that behind every face is a life full of experiences, struggles, and triumphs. In a world where opinions are formed in an instant, Barron's story serves as a powerful reminder to slow down, to question our biases, and to seek understanding before rushing to conclusions. In doing so, we can build a more compassionate and open-minded society,